It's like a feeding frenzy with buyers. When you get a good listing, they are all over it. All seller prospects, get your accounting in order. We get within 10 days of closing and the title company calls me and they go, do you know your boy owes $250,000 to the IRS in payroll taxes? I'm like, what? Now I'm going back to the seller and say, did you really think you could hide that from us?
You're listening to Before You Buy or Sell a Business, hosted by Jared Johnson, the top SBA lender in the country. On this show, we break down business acquisitions, talk to industry pros, and provide real-world advice for buyers and sellers.
All right, welcome back to Before You Buy or Sell a Business. I'm Jared Johnson. Today, I've got a special guest. I've got Dennis Hayes. Dennis brings us a different perspective. He bought a business, but he's also a business broker. He's worn many hats. So I'm excited to have him on and pick his brain and see what we can find out. So Dennis, thanks for coming on. Maybe you could start by giving us a little background about yourself.
I own the oldest business brokerage firm in the state of Arizona at 60 years. It was started by a 30-year-old lawyer who, when he turned 80, sold it to his daughter and to me. Since then, we have taken in a third partner. We have usually 15 to 18 licensed agents, generally a little over 100 businesses for sale at any one time. Usually 20 or 25 are under contract and in some stage of due diligence and marching forward from there. In those 60 years, we have sold and closed over 5,000 privately held Arizona-based businesses. So you might say we don't need a lot more practice by now. We've gotten pretty good at it. We are only licensed to sell businesses in the state of Arizona. Of course, buyers come from all over the world, but the businesses themselves must be domiciled in the state of Arizona.
Great. Well, yeah, it's always good to kind of hear your perspective. So maybe we could pick your brain quick just on business brokerage. Had a lot of people ask lately kind of what is the status, what's going on in the industry. Seems to be ever changing, but kind of wanted to get your 2 cents on what you're seeing currently as far as kind of listing volume, what type of, price range businesses are coming on the market, and then what type of buyers you have, and we can kind of just get a little update.
Well, first off, I'm in the Phoenix Valley. I think in terms of hotspots, probably Florida, Texas, and Arizona are about as hot as it gets. I believe the Phoenix Valley is still growing at the rate of 20,000 people per month. And that has continued unabated year after year after year. My only concern about that growth really is the water supply. We're out here in the middle of the desert. That's a whole other story. But if you were to fly over the Phoenix Valley in a helicopter, the amount of new construction coming out of the ground would just absolutely take your breath away. As a firm, WCI Business Brokers, WCI Business Sales is the name of my firm. We are industry agnostic. We sell absolutely anything you can name, save a few. I think there are some industries, like dental practices, for example, that they kind of have developed their own gig and people to represent them in a very professional manner. We sell anything with good books and records. I jokingly tell folks we generally don't sell Chinese restaurants because nobody has any idea how much money they make. But anything with good books and records we can sell. And sometimes the multiples are different depending on the industry and the circumstances, of course. But that's what we're here for, to provide that counsel to sellers. I probably should also say, for purposes of this podcast, that we only represent sellers. We've only represented sellers for 60 years. Having said that, by the time we get to the finish line on a deal, most buyers would tell you, no, he represented both of us. They were fair as could be, right down the middle. Even the draft documents were not written in a one-sided manner. And that's really how it should be. As far as I'm concerned, we have a fiduciary type responsibility for full disclosure to both parties. We don't hide anything. Probably more than 90% of our deals are bank financed. So if you have been hiding something, it'll usually get ferreted out in a bank underwriting department or by an independent third-party business appraiser that was retained by that bank underwriting department to have an independent look.
So are you seeing that you have more listings now than you did maybe 18 months ago, less?
Yeah.
How's that looking? I mean, and obviously being in Phoenix, where it's such a growing market, you used the word hot, which I don't know if you're trying to use a pun, considering we're in the middle of July right now. It's probably really hot, but maybe let me know how you're doing on listing volume. I'm hearing that things are down a little bit, but I'm kind of curious if you're seeing the same thing.
We have found the acquisition of listings to have gotten tougher and tougher and tougher. And so, what would be the reason for that? A logical reason would be that owners don't want to give up the goose that laid the golden egg. And people almost never sell for business reasons. They almost always sell for personal reasons. So the same seller that would tell me, well, Dennis, I'm going to work another 10 or 12 years, might be the guy who calls me in a panic 1 year later and says, how fast can you get me out of here? And we're like, well, what happened to 10 or 12 years? Well, when I spoke to you last year, my parents didn't have Alzheimer's and my wife didn't have stage 4 cancer. So you never know what's going on in somebody else's life, but there's personal reasons they're selling and not business reasons. And business also got soft when SBA loans went from, I don't know, I think I remember as low as 4.5% up to as high as about 11.5%. At 11.5%, a buyer feels like he's working for the bank. Every 4 weeks, he is really getting laid away. It's like he's working for the bank and not for himself any longer. So that, I think, slowed things quite a bit. And now, as you're intimately familiar with, the pressure has actually been downward on interest rates. It's been very helpful to getting businesses sold. But we are seeing owners hang on to businesses longer and longer, and until they're pried away from it, the grandkids move to the other side of the country, somebody's ill, they're tending to not be as quick to list them. And as a result, it's like a feeding frenzy with buyers. When you get a good listing, they are all over it and they're in a hurry. And now they're calling my office saying, can you give me a heads up a couple of days in advance about what's going to be listed and what's coming to market? Because some of these things seem to pop an LOI practically over a weekend, even ahead of due diligence. That's a whole nother conversation, by the way, in the business brokerage industry, but it's possible for agents that work in a business brokerage firm to use an LOI as a tool to quickly move the other agents and buyers away just by popping a quick LOI. And the buyer and seller have never met. They've never had a conference call. There's been no real due diligence on numbers. They just submitted an LOI to try to, with an exclusivity clause, to try to get everybody else on the sideline and give them a chance to take their backpack off and sit down on the ground and go, okay, now let's really talk about it now that we have this thing corralled for a little while. So it's not a picnic out there for buyers because the amount of companies for sale, I believe, are quite a bit less than they used to be. I'm not sure what's going to be the catalyst to turn that around. As I say, I'm in a rapidly, wildly growing market in every sense. For example, Taiwan Semiconductor has come here and spent like $100 billion with a B, and in making computer chips in the Phoenix Valley, they're employing 5,000 people that have flown in here, most fairly young, most that make 6 figures of money, all that drive cars and eat restaurants. So it's a robust market. Ultimately, with all the expansion, there'll just be more and more opportunity for sellers and buyers. But right now, my observation is owners are really hanging on to businesses. They're not very quick to sell them.
Yeah, makes sense. And I'm kind of seeing the same thing. I think we had a rush for a couple of years there of people unloading stuff or kind of moving on, and then now we're starting to see people hang on to them a little bit longer. So we'll have to see if something happens in the market that sort of pushes them out, whether that's lower interest rates or anything else. We'll have to wait and see. But hopefully we keep things steady at least, and then if we can get things moving along again, it'd be great. So if you had to tell a seller just one piece of advice, something that you probably run into on every deal or you wish sellers knew, what would that be?
So the number one problem and deal killer in our office, and it's been this way for, couple of decades is what I fondly call sloppy books and records. We meet with a seller prospect. Hey, what are you on a QuickBooks system? What? Oh yeah, everything's fine. Yeah, no, good books and records. And we have to take that as gospel truth. So we develop owner's cash flow forms or seller's discretionary earnings forms. So when we're developing those, we're looking for add backs, things that the company paid for that seller, company cars and trucks, meals, travel, entertainment, health insurance premiums, interest on borrowed money. Anything that business paid that was for the benefit of that owner seller goes onto that sheet. And what we've found of late, Jared, is that too many business owners will get a credit card or a debit card, hand it to their spouse, put one in their pocket, and decide to put every single expense that they have in life through the business. I mean, groceries, kids' soccer and ballet lessons, trips to Disney, anything goes through the business. Of course, it's not a legitimate business expense, but it does a wonderful job at knocking down taxable income, and it's a good keep away from the IRS game. And what we have to, once we discover this, what we have to tell those sellers is something like this: congratulations, you've been highly successful in beating the IRS out of money. But what I need you to know is for every dollar that you beat them out of, you've probably cost yourself $3 in a business sale. So if you put an extra $150,000 in your pocket in cash in the course of a year, you just knocked about $450,000 off a selling price. And trust me, the company makes that doesn't work. If it's not in writing, it didn't happen. Also, as we mentioned, over 90% of the people go to a bank for a loan. If the bank can't see it on the tax return, and they certainly wouldn't see that kind of money on a tax return, you're not going to get a credit for it. So my number one thing for seller prospects is to get your books and records in order. If you have a situation where you say, okay, you know what, guilty as charged, I have used that company for every little expense, my books and records are all over the place, and the company that I just bought with my son, which was an 80-year-old cooling company in the Phoenix Valley, had such books and records. The only way to ferret out what that company really makes is to hire a third-party, independent, professional CPA firm that excels at the task of quality of earnings reports. Bite the bullet, Mr. Owner Seller, pay for the Q of E report. And it's amazing how all of the white noise just gets shut off as soon as they look at those reports. They know they're looking at the real numbers. Now, what's a bank going to do? You'll have to tell your listeners about that. But when a bank is looking at a tax return, they're pretty sure those aren't the real numbers, and they're holding it next to a quality of earnings report for the same company. And you can see every single line item on every bank statement, every month, every credit card statement, all allocated to categories. And now it's real clear what the company makes. You'll have to decide on what you're going to base your valuation on. For us as a firm, we will go with the quality of earnings report all day long. Doesn't mean you're going to get a friendly banker that's willing to lend off a quality of earnings report. You'll have to address that, Jared. But we have found that to be the most useful tool there is. So to all seller prospects, get your accounting in order. If you're not sure if it's in order, hire your own CPA maybe to do a review of your numbers and see where somebody else can come along and pick it apart. But I will tell you, the amount of egg that you get on your face when a buyer comes along with a due diligence firm or his CPA and looks at books and records that you thought were good, and the seller told you they were good, and they find stuff that's just downright, from an accounting standpoint, just downright goofy. Balance sheets and P&L statements that don't match at all. Things are all over the place. You can't even tell what. It's a hornet's nest, you just don't even know where to start. I say, okay, when I see something like that, start with a quality of earnings report.
Yep. Yeah, I would completely agree. And we will use the quality of earnings for underwriting. So it's really probably the only way to understand what's really going on in the business. Now, of course, you did hit on a really good point, is make sure you're using somebody that's reputable, somebody that's a CPA, somebody that actually knows what they're doing when they're going through. I think there's a lot of bad actors out there as well that are doing QOV that are kind of just taking the QuickBooks statements and maybe recategorizing a couple things, but they're not really looking at, how to validate those numbers that should be add backs. So if
Right.
we've got a good report, we will definitely use it. So I think it's a great piece of advice, and it's definitely the number one challenge we run into every day is the seller's books and records. It's really frustrating looking at deals and you can't get them to work because the add backs are so outrageous.
Yeah, so we have found such a firm. It's not my goal to promote their firm on your broadcast, but if anybody wanted to contact me afterward, I would tell them that most fair pricing, highly competent, willing to defend to banks and bank underwriting departments and walk them through their quality of earnings report, how they did what they did. Absolutely first rate. What a godsend finding that firm was. So we've used them several times on several deals, and they've been great.
Okay, great. Well, we'll definitely give everybody a link to you, obviously, at the end, and then they'll be able to reach out to you and
Okay,
cover that. So,
sounds good.
real quick before we get into your actual deal, what would you tell a buyer? What are buyers doing to mess up deals that you wish they knew on the beginning of the transaction when they're reaching out to you?
Well, unless the buyer is from a very strong accounting background, the buyer might think he's looking at good books and records and then get blindsided later. I think it would be worth it for a buyer if they're looking at internally generated reports of the company and there's been no Q of E report. That buyer should very much just rely on what they see on the tax return. And if there's things in addition to that, they probably should hire some professional help, accounting help, to really dig into the books and records and make sure that everything is as it appears to be. Because it's amazing what kind of games can be played, accounting a tax basis versus accrual basis accounting. People that don't want to show a lot of inventory at the end of the year, where all the cash went into inventory, it's on the shelf, but you don't see it on the balance sheet. They want to pay taxes on it. You really need to sink your teeth into that so that you don't get blindsided. So I would tell a buyer beware on that too. And by the way, do not rely on your broker to have looked at all that sort of thing. The fastest way for someone in my position or any of my agents to get sued is to help with due diligence. We don't help with due diligence. We're facilitators of transactions. When a seller prospect brings us accounting, we have to look at it. We can question it if we see something that doesn't look right to us, but we have to take that as gospel truth until proven otherwise, and as bankers, you're a banker. I believe bankers live in a world where everything is guilty until proven innocent and everything's a lie until proven truthful. I think they need to. Probably a buyer should do that too. It's not very friendly feeling in a transaction, but you really need to hone in on those numbers and make sure you're buying what you think you're buying. And I would encourage you to even think of what you're buying a little differently than you might. You might think, I'm buying a business. I would say, no, what you're buying is a known and reliable revenue stream. That's what you're buying. Keyword reliable. Known and reliable revenue stream. That's what's for sale here. That's what you're paying a multiple on. Somebody else did all the brain damage, set up all the systems, put you in the starting blocks with your new tennies on. You're ready to go. They're handing over the keys. They're going to get paid for that. You're not going to hang out a shingle and start from scratch. So make sure you're really familiar with that known and reliable revenue stream, from where it comes, and that the likelihood of it continuing post-close is extremely high.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree with you. I think it's a good time to segue into the businesses you bought. We can kind of run through some of the due diligence that you did and all of that. So you already kind of explained a little bit about what it was, but maybe you could tell us a little about the business, and then we can kind of run through some of the numbers and how you decided to take the leap and go ahead and buy the business. So maybe give us a little background on the company, and then we'll go from there.
The company is an 80-year-old evaporative cooler company, sometimes called swamp coolers. They're way cheaper than air conditioning compressors and units. I think most people know what evaporative coolers or swamp coolers are, but basically you're running water down filtered sides and blowing a fan through it. And just the way you could get out of a swimming pool on a 100-degree day and feel cold for a moment as water evaporates off your skin, that's how evaporative coolers work. Everybody's familiar with them in the Southwest where the humidity is not extremely high. You can't air condition warehouse space with 40-foot ceilings. It's just not going to happen. There's just not enough electricity in the world to do that. So they all have big evaporative coolers on the roof. And I identified this as a great business 8 years ago because I sold this business. I was the listing agent. And I sold this business to a guy who was like 36 years old 8 years ago. Just happened to call him up and say, "Hey, are you thinking about selling that business anytime soon? How are things?" And he said, "Oh my God, is your call ever timely? I've been talking with my family. We got a lot of stuff going on here. We really need to get this business sold. I'll come in with all my books and records." And he did. And he was one of the guys that put every expense on the planet through credit and debit cards that he and his wife had personally. And my assistant tried and tried to find all the ad backs, and there was a list of football field long. It was impossible. We finally threw our hands up and said, "We need a quality variance report or we can't go forward on this." So we finally got a quality of earnings report, but it was complex and it took long enough. And then he said, now he's got his back up against the wall. He's got to get this company sold. I didn't understand what was going on in his life, but it turns out he did need to get that company sold. And so I said, well, what do you want to do? Lower the price? The price was 1.9 or something like that. Are we allowed to talk about prices on your show?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's up to you.
1.9. I go, "You want me to take the price down to 1.7? And he goes, "No, I want it at like 1.4. And I said, well, if you're really going to trim $500,000 off the price, my son and I might be the buyers. And he said, well, if you and your son are going to be the buyers, I'm probably going to throw in the inventory. It's worth $200,000 to $300,000. So I'm looking at a company that makes $800,000 a year, and I'm feeling like I'm getting to buy it for more like $1.2 million. That's a very low multiple. And
Extremely low. Yeah, it's a great price.
my way of thinking, if you can't sell cooling in the Phoenix Valley in the summer with 80-year reputation, you're probably really doing something wrong. So we put my son in there to train with him while we were going through all the due diligence and underwriting and whatever. But the quality of earnings report is the only thing that allowed us to do this deal. It would have been absolutely impossible. We had a few people come forward before we had that Q of E report. Well, I can't find this on the tax return. Or where's that on the tax return? I said, listen, a lot of these expenses are going to be buried in cost of goods sold on the tax return. And they, well, then we can't buy it. And the banks would say, well, then we can't finance it. And so I said to the seller, we're not going anywhere without a quality variance report. No one's going to buy your company because of the manner in which you have managed it with those credit cards and debit cards and using everything for your own personal little piggy bank. So we cut our deal with him. We went into documents. We got him out as quickly as we could. We worked with First Internet Bank, as you know, and we had a good experience. Everybody was very diligent, almost too much so at times. But we finally closed on at the end of February, and March in Arizona was the hottest month in recorded history for March. I got married March 20th. It was the hottest recorded day in March in Arizona since records have been kept. It was 105. It was supposed to be 76
Whoa.
when we made that date. But as a result, at the end of March, my son says, "Dad, the company just had its biggest month in its history, 80-year history." They were standing three deep at the counter. Everybody wanted to fire up their evaporative cooler units and found out, oops, they're all rusted. They're corroded with calcium. They need parts, belts, pumps, motors, side filters. So it's very much a parts company. We sell whole units. We sell the parts, and we actually manufacture and stamp and paint those side panels and can make them to within a 16th of an inch to fit any unit. So that's a part of our business as well. It's manufacturing. So that's how we came to own that business. If I didn't have a son in his early 30s that was hungry and looking for something and sharp as a tack, I wouldn't do it. And I'm an old guy now. I'm in my mid 70s. I'm not going to make take on $3 million of debt in a commercial building and a business at this age without my son, no matter how good the business is. So we bought what we assessed was a known and reliable revenue stream, especially after we saw the quality of earnings report. We know where all the money's going. We know what the margins are. The margins are great, by the way. And so that's the story about how we came to own a business as well as being the brokers of record that listed it. And then we became the buyers also.
So being typically on the seller side, the broker side, obviously, as you mentioned, you do a great job kind of working with the buyers as well, getting them through the process. Was there anything that maybe caught your attention during the process that maybe you hadn't seen really before, being kind of representing the seller and helping the buyer, that it gave you kind of a new perspective?
When we take a listing, I try to tell sellers, because we get in a little in a negotiation with them about commissions and whatever, and I say, look, I want you to be clear about something, Mr. Seller. When a broker takes a listing, it's not the seller against the broker. It's the seller and the broker against the world. Our job is to harvest every justifiable dollar that we can on behalf of a seller out of a business. To do that, we need to find every add back and every dime that business spent that was for the personal benefit of the seller or his family, and make sure it makes its way onto that owner's cash flow sheet or seller's discretionary earnings sheet. And we need to be able to have good enough books and records to stand on those numbers in due diligence and to stand on those numbers with the bank underwriting department. So the story in this case was very much the same. There are surprises sometimes, and the surprises usually come to me, and they don't come often, thank God, from a third party like a title agency. So I have a questionnaire. Mr. Seller, are there any liens on the business? Absolutely not. We get within 10 days of closing, and the title company calls me and they go, do you know your boy owes $250,000 to the IRS in payroll taxes? I'm like, what? Now I'm going back to the seller and say, did you really think you could hide that from us? That title company now has to withdraw that on the HUD-1 closing statement and send it to the IRS. They're not allowed to give that to you. That's a lien on the business that you didn't tell me about. So I say to sellers, don't hide anything from your broker. And I say to the buyers, you have to investigate everything. Doesn't matter who you think the broker represents. We are facilitators of deal. We do our best to tell you everything that we know or we could learn. I literally, about 5 years ago, was selling a sandwich shop that was like a Subway competitor. And I'm selling it to a guy. I thought he was a little belligerent on the phone. And he got right up to SBA loan approval, and I got a call from the banker, and they said, Did you know that buyer just got out of prison? He spent 9 years there for beating a guy to death that was his best friend. I said, what? So nobody likes surprises in business. Buyers and sellers, don't surprise your brokers. Get it all out on the table. If you got some dirty laundry, get it all out. Make sure we know it, because I promise you, it's going to come out and it's going to look way worse. If we have a way to fix it, repair it, spin it, do something with it before it's out there in the market and in buyer land or whatever, give us a chance to do that. Or give us a chance to walk away if we just can't represent you.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you had mentioned that you also bought the building at the same time. We're seeing more and more people that are looking for that, or that's been included. Maybe you
Yeah.
could cover just kind of quickly what due diligence you did on the property as well, and any kind of advice that you would give a buyer or seller in regards to buying the building with it.
There was an inspection on the building, of course. Bankers hire an inspection. In that inspection, a few things were not told to us. For example, it had 4 or 5 electric panels that were like 2 years older than God and a fire hazard, according to them. And all of them had to be replaced. That just cost us $12,000 to have an electrician come in and put in all new panels. So there's something that I wouldn't know. Walking around a building, looking at it, and inspector didn't say a boo about it. I don't know of any real estate that just has gone down and stayed down. Over time, real estate does well. So I told you 8 years ago, I sold this building and business to this 36-year-old guy who just bailed out on it at age 44. And for memory, he paid about $650 for the building. My son and I paid $1,650,000. So he had $1 million of appreciation in a commercial building in an 8-year period, in addition to the money that he made from the company along those 8 years. Real estate generally has been a great investment. There was no way that we were going to go forward with this transaction without that building. One, we know it's going to grow. It's probably by the time my son sells that building, I won't be here, but I'm sure it'll be worth a heck of a lot. It's in a great location. There is an allure to just being a tenant, not parting with all the money up front. I have to say, historically, over time, if you have an opportunity to buy the building with the business, you should do it. Now, we have a lot of, like, I have a spa in Sedona that we've listed several times, and it's a beautiful business. 40 or 50 massage therapists, makes $500,000 a year in owner's cash flow. Bought a building for $700,000 many years ago. It's now worth $2.2 million. No longer does the owner's cash flow of that company support that building for a new guy coming in. If he wants to buy a business that makes $500,000, he's probably going to pay $1.5 million. Add another $2.2 million for the property. Have him put down 10%, and you're going to find out at today's interest rates that owner's cash flow is not sufficient to support them both. So now the guy is faced with a decision. Do I move this business out of that expensive building and try to sell it on my own? What's going to be the attrition rate in my clients if I move this business? What's going to be the attrition rate in my massage therapists? How little can I take for the building and swallow a bitter pill in order to make the numbers work? But there seems to be more and more situations wherein the physical real estate is outclassing the owner's cash flow of the business and can no longer support it. So in our case, that wasn't the case, thank God. We had enough owner's cash flow to support the business and the building. And better yet, because the building was 51% or more of the transaction, we were able to get 25-year amortization on the entire package, business and building. Had it been the other way around, $1,650,000 for the business, maybe $1.2 million for the building, we would have been stuck with 10-year amortization on the business and 25 on the building. I guess you guys may have given us a blended rate, but the payment would definitely be higher. And that higher payment may not have fit into the debt service coverage box that you bankers like it to fit into. So buyers should be highly cognizant about the value of the building relative to the value of the business. See if there's opportunity for them to get 25-year amortization on an entire package, and work with the banker on that debt service coverage, because if there's not enough there to cover that business and enough left over to support a new owner and his family, it's just not going to work. It won't pencil.
Yeah, we've seen that quite a bit recently where it's sort of the same thing you see in some neighborhoods, right? Where somebody bought a house 15, 20 years ago, and then it's gone significantly up in value. They could never afford to buy the house again at that point, but they've been able to stay in it because of, the original price. So I think it's always great, like you mentioned, to get the real estate if you can. It also helps make sure that you're never going to be, having to move or spending significant money moving or losing customer base based on your location or anything like that. So, and then of course the tax benefits and everything that come along with it. So it's always great if you're able to buy the real estate as well. So,
Well, not to speak for a banker,
yeah.
but when you bring real estate with the transaction, the banker's got a tangible. If there's no real estate and they're looking at an allocation table and a purchase document in an asset sale, and they see line items that say goodwill, customer base, covenant not to compete, all these intangibles are what bankers think of as airballs. They're financing an airball, and they really are financing a known and reliable revenue stream because they have no asset to attach in the event of a default. And bringing real estate to the transaction will always make your financing, I think, go more smoothly.
Yeah, most banks like to see collateral included in it. So it
Right.
definitely helps. I've really appreciated your insight on this. It's nice seeing, kind of hearing from a broker and then also someone that's buying. So I always have two questions at the end. So the first one is, have you ever had a mentor or do you currently have a mentor?
I'd say my mentor in the business brokerage industry was Chuck Tanko. He was the founder. He was the 30-year-old lawyer who sold it to us when he was 80. When I got there 15 years ago, he gave me a test to take. And he actually said to me, based on the answers on this test, I would say you have more experience in business and financial matters than any of the agents here by quite a wide margin, but you don't specifically know the business brokerage industry. And he was correct. And so I would make it my business to sit through his conference calls. When I would bring a client into the conference room, I would always call him in to have a chat because it lended credibility. This guy, by the way, was the go-to guy for the Arizona court system when they needed expert witness and testimony in matters surrounding the business brokerage industry. So I feel like I learned from the best there. And now we're hiring new agents, and I'm the new Chuck, and I'm teaching those guys. But it's kind of industry where you just keep learning and learning. You're always going to see something like, wow, I've never seen that before. You never stop learning.
Yeah, it always surprises me what you feel like you've worked on everything, done every deal, and then, hundreds and hundreds of deals. And then all of a sudden one comes and you're like, whoa, okay. But
Yeah,
that's what kind of makes it fun and makes it exciting that it's not the exact same thing every single day. So, you get to make a really, big positive impact in different people's lives and different families' lives, but then you're also constantly learning and
sure.
things are changing. So it
Yeah,
makes it fun.
yeah, it really is.
Yeah. So, okay. Final question. What motivates you? Obviously, you've been successful. You've acquired this company. You've done great with business brokerage. You've got a great family. You're able to work with your son now. What motivates you?
I would say there is a feeling on closing day that's not just euphoric for a broker receiving a commission. I'm watching somebody, Mr. Seller, most of whom feel like They just had a boat anchor lifted off their shoulders. They have passed the baton of ownership to somebody new. They've scraped some chips off the table. Often it's enough chips that it represents true financial security for their family. And they're often on the older side. And on the other side, I see a young, eager beaver who looks at that business and said, look at this place. No website, no wrap trucks, no advertising, no social media, no anything. Man, am I going to get in there and rip and tear with this and grow this thing? It's going to be 3 times this size in 5 years. And they're excited. And so you got a happy broker, he got a commission, and he succeeded in putting 2 guys together and getting through all the negotiation documents, due diligence, financing. There's a lot. It's not like selling a house. It's real work. It's real work. We tell people 7.5 to 10 months typically to sell a business. And maybe 90 days of that time is going to be spent getting the financing situated. And the rest of the time, we're just going to try to identify an appropriate person to come in and step into the shoes of that seller and take the reins. But it seems to be a very happy day, closing day for all the parties. Everybody's happy, and hopefully they're going to stay that way. But so I'm motivated by those happy days. Of course, everybody needs money to live, and I have all kinds of obligations financially, so I don't feel like I'm quite ready to retire. Could I? Yeah, I guess I could, but I like training these guys at the office. I like copying them on my emails and letting them read and learn. I like their questions once they do so, and I like them to see what a successful transaction looks like from the first time a buyer and seller walk into our conference room, meet each other, and shake a hand, to several months later when they're walking off a closing table, having signed all the documents and all the wire transfers happen. And it seems to motivate everybody.
Yeah, definitely some great motivation for you, and it's always fun to see that. And sometimes I feel like we get so busy that we sort of forget, and we've done it for so long and done so many transactions that it starts to wear off a little bit. But then you get that one where someone's calling you, in tears because they're so happy, and and then like you, someone calls you 5 years later and goes, "Hey, look what I did with this. I'm selling now," or I just wanted to say hi, and it's really fun to see where people can take things, and it's
Yeah,
a good industry to be in.
totally agree. Yeah, it's great. Business ownership is not for everybody. It really isn't. The economy has hills and valleys. There'll be disappointments. There'll be wins. If you're having heart palpitations over numbers that fluctuate a little, it's probably not for you. But but for those with a real entrepreneurial spirit, with a vision, somebody that feels success is its own reward, they can sit back and say, "Look what I created," or "Look how I fixed that," or they just they feel like problem solvers. There are personalities that strike me as always being part of the problem and others always being part of the solution. And if you can be one that's part of the solution, that is absolutely its own reward in the business world.
Yeah, great advice there. So how can people find you if someone wants to search for you as a business broker, or wants to come by the business and make a purchase?
Yeah. Well, we are WCI Business Sales. We're in Phoenix. You're going to post a link for me, I trust, into this podcast that they could click. You'll have my email address. By the way, if they live out of state and they just want a few minutes of advice or bounce something off me after hearing this podcast, feel free to call me. It's not like I'm not going to talk to you because you're not an Arizona resident or there's no chance you're ever going to be selling an Arizona business. Well, I talk to everybody. So
Right.
it's just fine. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll definitely do that. And I appreciate you coming by, and, hopefully we'll be able to catch up sometime in the near future and hear all the amazing things you guys are doing.
Great. Okay, Jared.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you all for listening to Before You Buy or Sell a Business. If you found value in this episode, please follow the show, leave a positive review, and share it with someone. For more information, check out jaredwjohnson.com. We'll see you all next time.